everyone. Welcome to this roundup. As the development of AI creates new opportunities for everyone, the transformative power of AI technologies is visible in the progress and development seen across nations and all its components. While the goal is to improve the lives of everybody around the world, it is also raising new questions about the best way to build fairness, interpretability, privacy, and security into the emerging systems. Since these issues are far from solved, they are in fact at the forefront of the technology adoption across nations. As AI technologies becomes widespread and deeply embedded in products and services and responsible for an increasing number of decision-making processes like benefit payments or mortgage approvals or parole granting, college admission, interviews, medical diagnoses, and more, they are becoming less visible and less transparent. Now, since algorithms are not viewable, one of the real risks with AI is amplifying and reinforcing existing human biases into AI decision making processes. While the biases could be either intended or unintended, the reality is that AI based decision making should bring trust and transparency to those impacted. So, as we move forward in using AI systems for decision making, trust is going to be very crucial. So, to discuss how to develop that trust in AI systems, I'm delighted to welcome Anand Tamboli to this roundup. Anand is the author of the upcoming book on keeping your AI under control, a pragmatic guide to identifying, evaluating, and quantifying risk. Welcome, Anand. We're honored to have you on this roundup.
Thank you so much, Jayashree. Very happy to be here.
Wonderful, Anand. So, what is responsible AI and what is it about?
So the way I describe responsible AI to anyone is essentially, it starts with the premise that tools or systems per se are not hurtful, or they don't have any meaning behind them. So people using them are hurtful or could be hurtful, or they have a meaning or agendas behind them. So thing with the technology is, if you learn how to use it effectively, it works for you. But it depends on who you are and how you would use it, essentially. So one of the things that distinguishes humans from other species or others in general is our freedom to decide how we act. And whatever we choose, we could always have chosen differently. That's why we are choosing from multiple options. So responsible AI is essentially, it's not a better technology. It's about how we choose to make it and how we choose to use it. So in a way, AI is giving us a tremendous power. It's a great power. And obviously that means with great power, we have to have, it has to be handled with greater responsibility. Now, AI is raising more concerns than any technology before, and that's because potential nature of being disruptive, and it can create a larger impact than any other technology. So the concerns such as massive workforce displacement or loss of privacy, increased biases in decision making, general lack of control essentially over any automated systems or robot. So these issues are significant, and they also are addressable in my opinion. So if we approach with right planning, right oversight and governance, that is possible. So responsible AI, it's a framework, I would say, which brings several critical practices together, where we can ensure that ethical or transparent, accountable usage of these AI technologies is put in place, and they're used in a manner that is consistent with human expectations, organization values, human values, and societal laws or norms, essentially. Let
Sure.
me give you a small example out here. As in, under normal circumstances, mis-selling, if I sell you something by deceiving you or not giving you enough information, typically in the financial services domain, it will be dealt with utmost caution, and government will step in. There would be grave consequences. In fact, in Australia, we have had several royal commissions inquiries around that. But if you would implement a chatbot which is going to sell you something, how do you handle that? And I think understanding that these complexity exists is in a way being responsible so that you can deal with more pragmatically.
Yes, no, no. You made some really good points. Now, at one point, you said that how the organizations choose to use the technology, that makes it responsible. Now, organization, if they develop the algorithm on their own, then it is possible for them to control a lot of the outcomes, because then they can prevent the what goes into the programming of the code, and they can prevent the bias getting into the system. But if they purchase the systems off the shelf, or somebody else has developed it, and they just train their system using their data, then they don't have much control. So it still depends on how the technology was developed, who the developers were, and how, under what conditions the algorithm was developed. That would define whether that AI algorithm is responsible or not, and that would require probably a different approach. But simply basing our destiny or decision making process on the algorithm that has already been developed, I think that would be probably misguided. If somebody else has developed and we don't know who those developers were and under what conditions they defined the algorithm and set the parameters. So that we have to be very careful about. But what are the foundational elements of responsible AI from your understanding?
Good question. So, in fact, I think these elements have to be timeless in nature. They have to be deeply rooted in an organizational fabric, and it's not something that would come just because the AI is there. Elements such as ethical purpose or societal benefit. So, how organization operates, regardless of technology. Do you always put societal benefit upfront or not, or do you always go by uh, just the profit and shareholder benefits? Because if that's the case, then probably your decision making would be twisted. Again, discrimination, fairness, safety, reliability, all these factors are underpinning the fundamental elements of AI. But some of the elements also come from supply side of AI. For instance, we have seen a lot of vendors constantly pushing for faster adoption, that you must start using it, you can't be left behind, there's no way you will die if you don't adopt now. And I think this is borderline greedy. It's not a customer centric approach, because I understand vendors want to push AI by making it easier, frictionless in a way. So that's why they are packaging it in a black box so that you don't have to bother about it. But they seem to ignore this inherent risk that is in their system or solutions. That it's not just the solution, one point solution. It's a whole ecosystem which is beyond your control as a vendor. There are multiple other things that interact. So understanding that factor, that it's not your solution only, and there could be several other systems that are interacting, is another fundamental element that people need to understand. It's more like becoming a cart before horse situation right now. It only will benefit vendors, and enterprises essentially will lose money because the moment they start without understanding what's going on, it just becomes, there's no turning back. They just enter a rabbit hole and bleed through the nose. But in general, I think it is must to cover. It has to cover three fundamental aspects. So number one is, are you designing the right solution? You don't have to understand what is inside the black box if that is the limitation. But at least, are you designing a right solution? The second one is, whatever solution eventually you are deciding or selecting, has that been designed right? Has it been developed or designed in a right way? And third part is, are you essentially covering all the risks? So if any organization, any company, any nation essentially covers these three aspects of any solution, any AI or technology implementation, I think they would be pretty much in control. Pretty much they would cover that responsibility part of it.
Yes, I think one more I think we can add is at number zero is what problem you are trying to solve, because a lot of time
Exactly.
a lot of times if you're trying to solve wrong problems, then it is not going to help. So I think we should start with what problem you're trying to
What
solve,
problem
and
is solved?
then we should move from there. But you made some really good points there, and I think it is very important that we spend more time in defining the problem, identifying the solution, designing solutions, and then then building the solution, because it has to be a very well thought approach. And in fact, risk group, we promote that we know all the algorithms that are being developed all across nations. We would need to at some point come up with a solution of how to define how and then name the algorithms, because a lot of algorithms at some point they become security risk, and we have no control. There are so many algorithms being developed all across nations, some in local languages, most in English, but a lot of them are in local languages. The coding happens in local languages like Chinese and many other languages. So then you have no idea what code is embedded into the algorithm, and that is a part of any product or services, and we have just no idea about what that is supposed to do and what is it supposed to do for the person who has designed the code or the designed the algorithm. So we need some security checks and balances, and we need to come up with security measures and security identification system that can identify that at certain
Hmm.
point, that if any algorithm becomes a security risk, then it has to go through the proper procedures. But that is a topic for another discussion. But these kind of risk management measures would need to be defined and developed. Otherwise we will have no control about AI, because just depending on approach of responsible AI framework, that we have to keep ethics in mind, we have to keep all these different variables in mind, and it is not going to change the human nature. We will need audits, we will need security checkpoints. So we will have to at some point, we have begun the discussion, this group has begun the discussion on that, and we'll have to at some point come up with a proper system, because otherwise just by depending on the goodness of the human nature, we will not be able to control AI. But that is a topic of discussion for another day. So how, as you mentioned, that we have to define solution in a very thoughtful way. So how should any organization design solution with a responsible AI framework?
In fact, if I follow on from my previous answer that AI has to cover these three fundamental aspects, I did develop a framework which I also mentioned in my book. It's a 10-step approach essentially, and it is amalgamation of a lot of business excellence or process and other practices and risk management practices. So if you put them together, essentially these 10 steps should be able to give you some idea, some framework as to having a uniformity in assessing that. So let me just briefly go through it. The first one is, as you said earlier, defining the problem correctly, because that's the fundamental step. If you miss that, then anything that you do afterwards is basically pointless. So, and more importantly, it has to uh, align with your short-term objective as well as long-term objective or long-term goal. So as a company, if your long-term goal is something, because it's always the case that the short-term deviations eventually add up and then long-term problems happen. So defining the problem is definitely number one. Secondly, establishing correct levers. So if you define that this is the problem I want to solve, quite often we assign symptoms of those problems. We try and solve the symptoms and not the correct levers, correct drivers. So establishing that we are exactly affecting the drivers and not just the symptoms is the second part. The third part is validating that all the drivers that you have identified, do they really make sense? Can you simulate, or at least by any mechanism, can you establish for the fact that these drivers are exactly going to affect the problem in a better way? And then when we choose a solution that, okay, now I have established my problem, I know what levers I need to pull to solve it, then I go and purchase a solution or develop a solution. But then we can't anymore link that solution to the problem, because problem is always abstract. I often say, and people think it is counterintuitive, but the thing is, with solution we always fix the causes or the levers. We affect the levers and problem is taken care of. So if we are able to establish that the solution is able to positively impact the lever, that's the fourth stage, and then you're sure that yes, it's going to work. And then the fifth part is verifying that it's going to fix the key problems, not just your bottom three problems, but bottom three levers, but the topmost levers first, because you're prioritizing things. Businesses have limited resources, so you can't fix everything, and that's how it should go. But then understanding the risk is the sixth part. Essentially, they can come in all sizes, small, medium, large, however you call it. But regardless of that, I think understanding and acknowledging first that their risks would be existent is the first part, and then the next part would be quantifying the risk, because otherwise it just feels that okay, every risk is similar unless you quantify in certain way, whether it's a high, medium, low, or whether you're putting actual risk number to it, a real number to it. But once we quantify, then it becomes easier to address and also to measure that how much you have reduced the risk.
Sure, no,
There's
those are all good points, Anand, and I think they would be helpful, in theoretically in understanding. But who will do the risk management? Who will go through all these steps for any algorithm? That would define whether it's going to be effective or not. Because the risk managers, they don't have understanding of the code. What is written in the algorithm? No, not many people can understand that. Even experts of programming, they will not be able to understand what exactly is coded. So
mm,
unless we involve very, very astute, very sharp individuals who can identify the coding issues or what is embedded in the code, what is it trying to do, we, even though we have all these defined, very well defined risk management structure and framework, we will not be able to understand, what is actually the algorithm designed to do.
right, but then you see the point here is even if you don't understand the algorithm by itself, and that happens with even the researchers or doctorate fellows, wherein they say that at some point in time the complexity goes beyond a limit where we just stop assessing it. But that's where I think the reverse validation has to happen, that fine, whatever is in this box, even if I can't make out what is in the box, now, and that's where probably we need to understand it from the context perspective, that where I want to use this black box. And in my context, if I understand my risk, then I would rather test all the scenarios, all possible, even remotest possible scenarios. I can test those scenarios with the black box, throw it at it, and see what comes out. And if I don't like what is coming out, then I'm just going to reject it. I won't accept it. But as long as I keep liking,
You are saying let's focus more on the output of the algorithm than what is in the algorithm.
testing algorithm, so which is why the second part, when we say that the solution has to be designed right, but then how much control we have as a company. If I'm buying a solution, I have
Exactly.
little to no control.
No control. You are right. Yeah.
So then I simply rely on my vendor that yes, you are following best practices, and you, if you say so, I just agree to it.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
what I can do on my side is I can test it rigorously.
yes, testing can be done vigorously, but again, if the algorithm is designed in certain way that when the testing is going on, you have to behave in certain way, and when the testing is done, when you are actually, doing what you're supposed to do, then you can go to the original behavior. That, because these algorithms are going to be very intelligent, so they
Hmm.
will know how to beat the testing and validation and all those different factors. So we'll have
Hmm.
to come up with a very different approach. These are all very well thought, ideas, and in ideal conditions, it should work. But we have to remember that these are intelligent systems that we are building. It will know how to fool humans. It will know how to fool the testing, and everything that they are supposed to go through, quality control or whatever. So it will be interesting to see how the battle emerges, between the man and machine, and how we come up with ways to control them. It would be very interesting to see that. But how to design responsibility and build trust? Even, I mean, I would prefer that we are able to design responsibility and trust right into the code. But is that the right approach, or you have something else in your mind?
Uh, I would say building in the code is always the best place to start. But like we said, that if we are not relying on it, or we that itself is in question, then how do you test it? So let me give you a real life analogy here. That if I have to trust someone in real life, I would typically rely on three things without knowing what is happening in somebody's head. Three things I would rely on as to how someone was taught, or how was their upbringing and education in itself. So what typically they should be thinking. The second is I would test them thoroughly, at least ask them as many questions as I can to ensure that they have learned it well, understood the rules of the society. And they may still be pretending that yes, they understood, but that's the second part. And the third part is I have to ensure that they're operative all the time in a right environment, so that I'm ruling out the environmental factor. So when push come to shove, that I can pinpoint exactly what is going wrong, because I have validated your learning or upbringing. That's fine. I have validated that operating environment is not an issue. Then what exactly wrong? So similarly, if you go with AI, and if you want AI to be trustworthy, these three things: the training part, the testing part, and the surrounding of the AI system, that uh, because it will always come back saying that this particular solution is doing fine, rest of the systems are not doing fine.
So,
So that
rest of the systems, are you talking about AI based systems, or the other systems that are in the organization?
uh, other systems, processes, other AI systems which are interacting with your system in question, as well as human beings, because that's always the point, right? Someone will say, okay, system is right, you don't know how to use it.
Right, right, right. So there will be a lot of interactive issues and integration issues.
Yes.
I hear you on that. So how do we implement governance? If we come up with an effective governance structure, then how do
Hmm.
we implement that, and how should automated systems, the decision system, should be governed?
Uh, I think the best way to implement governance for any decision making system in particular is to make it follow fundamental rules of the law, in a nutshell. So, rule of the law says decision maker must be transparent and accountable. So, make AI system transparent and fix the accountability as to if something goes wrong, or who is going to take that accountability. Is that the system, or is that a person managing it? So, we have to have a name assigned to it all the time. Rule of the law also says that decision maker must be predictable and consistent, so that we believe it's trustworthy. So we have to make AI system, decision making system, predictable and consistent as well. And finally, the rule of law also says that decision maker, you must always put equality before the law. So the AI system also must be free of bias as much as possible, and discrimination. So even if it means diverging from some of the set rules, in that case, but as long as it's not discriminating recklessly. So in general, I think human always have to be kept in the loop, as long as the decision making is concerned or required, because automated decision making, at the best, they should recommend, they shouldn't be deciding for us.
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, it should not decide us. It can give us guidance. It can make our identification process easier. But at least for now, the decision process, humans should be involved, because we don't know how the algorithms are behaving, and
Yeah.
until we develop that trust and responsibility in that, we have to keep the human factor, involved in that. But you mentioned the law. So all these algorithms, let's say, a company like Google has, come up with an algorithm, or any other company, Palantir or any other company, and then they are used across nations, not just in United States but in many other countries. So laws in every countries are going to be different. So
Yes.
the algorithm, so following the law should be encoded in the algorithm, or it should be external, based on the framework that you are proposing.
So typically, the fundamental technical part of the algorithm is one layer, and then the rule part. And we have been doing it in the past for RPAs or any other business system where the business rules are separate. So similarly, you can have fundamental rules of the law saying that these are the laws which essentially oversee the entire operation of the system. So that facility or that level of control has to be there.
I see. Got it. So, what are some responsible AI practices that you have come across during your observation or analysis?
Yeah. So when I did this detailed research as to what are the common principles, and obviously there are a lot of organizations that have put across their own understanding of this responsible AI. Google, Microsoft, PwC, Deloitte, and etc. But then there are common five themes that keep coming, and I think that makes a lot of sense. The first one is having a balanced scorecard, that I would call it. Like, so training and monitoring as well, the one part, but having a balanced scorecard saying that you have several metrics in a balanced scorecard which may interact with each other, and they could be detrimental, sometimes they could be additive in nature. Like when we say that to a sales force that go and sell something, we don't necessarily say then that you can discount the price so much that you can sell more, but that's kind of implied. So that's a balance they have to maintain, that without doing it. So how maximizing or minimizing one metric can affect the other, that should be known and that should be visible. So having that balanced scorecard for a system is one part. Second, keeping human in the loop. Wherever you think it's critical, it goes without saying that you have to have it, uh, because eventually systems lack common sense. You need a human adult to take that kind of a responsibility. Third part is keeping close eye on inputs, and there's a reason why we say garbage in, garbage out. So if your data has flaws, AI will always manifest them at scale. So ensuring that full spectrum. And I hear that quite often people say that if you throw a bit more data and let's give it a bit more data so that it can have a bit more accuracy, but I think that's it's a bit flawed thinking, because a good full spectrum data set is timely, it's complete, it's correct, integral, accurate, it has a balance. So all these things have to be there. You can't just have one type of data and too much of it, just not going to work. The fourth part is obviously understanding the limits, right? We can't just assume that it's going to be panacea in some way. And thoroughly, continuously testing. That everyone agrees that it's not just one-time testing required. It's not a typical software where you test and release. It is an evolving software, so you have to keep testing it constantly, regularly, because if something new comes up, you can capture it.
Yes, that is a fair point. It's not a one-time static system, so it's
Yeah.
a dynamic. So you have to continuously. I understand that. So I mean, partially we discussed this point about the AI, algorithm following the applicable laws in different
Mm.
nations. But how to employ AI to act in a manner that is compliant with stakeholder expectations, with the organization that is, either acquiring the algorithm or that has developed the algorithm, and it has, some set expectations about whether, what kind of process the algorithm needs to follow, or whatever steps it needs to go through, and how it needs to come to certain decision. So how to ensure that AI, is compliant with all those expectations?
Some of the rules, or say even laws, if you're buying across the nationality, then some of the rules are pretty black and white. If you say that We don't allow face recognition, for instance, or we don't allow identification by certain ethnicity or so. That is pretty black and white. You can easily test and accept or reject. But some of the gray areas where it is totally organization dependent, saying that what do you want or you don't want. I don't think technology vendors by themselves can dictate that, but they would simply go by customer requirement, and it is both parties' responsibility to make those requirements as black and white as possible. I understand that is always a gray area where a little bit plus and minus is accepted, but it's in both favor to have those expectations set out in a clear fashion. So every time you test or every time you accept or reject something, you have a valid reason and a basis to do that.
Yes, yes. Now that is a good point. Now, as you witness all these AI deployments all across different enterprises and industries,
Mm.
how do you see how do you see the businesses or enterprises ensuring responsible use of AI? Are they very serious in their initiatives, or it is just something that is on paper?
Quite frankly, many of the businesses are confused as to what to do, or simply because there's so many people out there with their own perspectives and advices on responsible AI or ethical AI. I mean, people understand why it is necessary, but they're clearly not sure how to go about it. At the same time, many businesses are not even there yet. So they're
Yes,
merely ensuring that best practices are followed. There's a standard protocol framework. So pretty old standards are still there. And
yes,
the issue is that people haven't quite understood the vastness or the scope of the risk that AI is bringing. They still think that it's not that a big deal. And I think the fact that we don't know what we don't know is a big deal. It's a big impediment,
it
which
is.
is restricting them from visualizing the problem.
Yes, very true, very true. That is a big challenge because unless you make the unknowns known, you have no
Yeah.
idea what you are dealing with. So, how do you see the use of AI unlocking the full potential of any enterprises, any organization's workforce?
Right. Now, this is a bit sensitive issue I see, and I'll take a bit longer on this. And there is a constant unrest amongst the workforce in several companies I have seen. People constantly talk about what's going to happen to my job and what do I do? What do I need to learn to keep up with it? So first of all, I think I would recommend that you should use AI systems only in a place where your workforce is complaining about the hard work, not just anywhere and everywhere. So if your workforce is not happy doing some job, then that's a good candidate to deploy AI. If they're doing it happily, why even touch it? The second part is I think where the time is an essence, or adding more members to the workforce is not the solution. Like if you need something to be done in microsecond or in a very short period of time where human capabilities don't go, that's a second you can implement. The
Yes,
third part is where unpredictable outcomes are costing more. That's where you can implement AI. And for everything else, I don't see you have any immediate benefit or need for the AI solution. I'll tell you one interesting example where I used to consult with one of the bank, and the project we had was to save a time, 2 hours per person per day, to give them back in the day. And 3 months in that project, we did not achieve any hit, and it wasn't clear what's going wrong. What are we missing? Until one day, a colleague commented saying that, "Hey, look, even if you give us 2 hours back a day, what are we going to do with it? Because as long as you don't answer that question, you will simply end up consuming those 2 hours by expanding our existing work." And that was a light bulb moment to say that we realize that yes, we are not just freeing that time. We must also ensure that their free time is repurposed in doing something better. then only that benefit can be accrued. On the same note, I think people are not afraid of losing jobs per se. They're uncomfortable because they don't know what will happen if they have more. So best way if a company wants to unlock the full potential of their workforce is taking that fear away. How can you do that? Well, the best thing you could do is essentially empower them with the AI, their own AI assistant, if I may say, which does their groundwork, and then enable them to take control of innovation, of say provide them autonomy to test their innovation, so that you're not letting them go. Putting their time to best use, better purpose. Then you're also making them do the grunt work by using that AI or automated assistant. So companies can that way enable them to better do better things for themselves.
Right. So, how do you foresee this responsible AI helping every component of our nation, irrespective of whether it's a business or whether it's a academic institution or government or
Mm.
any institution, how do you see responsible AI helping? And are there any commercial tools available to detect bias, or is it something that you just have to do it while you are developing the algorithm?
Uh, Not internal tools per se to detect bias and because that's the fundamental tenet of your statistics part or design part. So as long as you're doing all the right practices of statistics or machine learning, uh, they are pretty clear on. I think there are no clear tools available as well. So and perhaps because it's always an abstract concept. Responsible AI is a concept. It's not something that you do. It's the way you do it. So there are strategic tools like we used to use Hoshin Kanri, X Metrics, or similar, where at an organization level you can essentially link up and validate that your strategy uh, translates into your shorter goals. Your shorter goals translate into KPIs. KPIs translate into requirements, and those requirements essentially go into your IT system. So those tools exist. Uh, Tools that ensure that you're doing right things like typical project management testing tools are good enough to do that, how you're doing things right. And if you want to cover the risk aspect of it, especially, and that's a critical one, which I believe this pre-mortem analysis or failure mode analysis, HY matrix, these are the tools that have been used for past 20, 30 years. People use it for different purposes, but they give you clear, quantifiable results. So anyone in those tools can understand where the risks lie, how much is that risk, and which one to prioritize. So they
Right.
don't come exactly from AI background; they come from a different
Right. No, that's a good point. So, how is responsible AI different than explainable AI? Are they both same, or is it something different?
background. So I like giving analogies here. So I'll say explainable AI is much like air crash investigation, right?
Yes,
It's necessary, it's useful after the fact, but no use to avoid the accident. Responsible AI, on the other hand, is avoiding that crash in the first place.
I
So
see.
when we talk about explainable AI, it's all about being technically thorough. It's about being able to understand what happened, how it happened, why it happened, and having an auditable system in place. So where you can investigate after the fact and find out how each and every step was carried out, explain it to the auditor or government or anyone that look, this is what happened. Responsible AI, on the contrary, is being ethically, socially, and morally thorough. So there's no technique to be morally thorough, but it's about being able to control desires and put them second by placing human or societal interest first.
But it's
So
better to have explainable, right? Then it will tell us how it reached that decision. So that way, we are able to control a lot more than what we will be able to control with responsible AI, because it is more of a hypothesis approach, and developing framework, and then
mm,
hoping that the algorithm, follows our instructions, or follows our code of conduct and ethics that we have defined. But explainable AI, it will actually tell us how it reached a decision. So in some ways, it is still a little bit better than the responsible AI, I guess.
I mean, it's not one is better than other. It's actually both are important. One is important before the fact, and other is important after the fact.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Both approaches are necessary because sometimes you want to make sure that you listen to how they reach the conclusion of the
Hmm.
decision making process after it is conducted, and before the algorithm, when we are developing it, we want to make sure that we have the responsible AI features and parameters, everything embedded into the algorithm and into how we develop. So you are right. It both has its own place. So let's talk about your book. What is it about, and how do you see it making a difference? And what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners about your book, and where can they purchase it?
Right. Thank you for mentioning that. And look, I'm very passionate about this subject in a nutshell, emerging technology, because they have such a profound impact on human lives. So I want to contribute and make it better for humans, better for businesses in both ways. So during last year and a half, I realized there's a lot of AI hyperbole. So this hyperbole has given kind of everyone thinks AI solution mindset. So this mindset makes people believe that if you give them enough data, their machine learning algorithms will solve all the humanity problems. Like people believe that throwing more data is an answer. Quality is not that important. But we have already seen similar mindset earlier, which was there is an app for it mindset. And we know what it hasn't done any good in real life. You can't have app for everything. There are certain things that don't work like that. So instead of supporting any progress, this type of mindset is endangering the value of emerging technology and then setting unrealistic expectations. So and I've seen many companies then taking fire aim ready approach, just the opposite, which is totally detrimental to companies' growth and dangerous to customers as well. So if I'm a customer, I'm the victim of it in a way. So I think the better approach to consider suitability and applicability, and which is why I wrote this book trying to explain it. But when I tried to find more about responsible AI, ethical AI, and how these frameworks are put in place, I found that the problem is not with the responsible AI paradigm, as in people don't understand or know. They know why it is necessary. They know why ethical or explainability is necessary. But how do I do it? How do I show you that I'm ethical? How do I show you I'm being responsible? Or how do I even tell my team to implement AI responsibly? I don't have any recipe. So
Yes.
in my book, I try to explain and address that how part of the responsible AI. So if companies agree that responsible AI is necessary, my book will guide them how to achieve it. I also talk about one probably tangential factor, which is AI insurance. And it's not AI used in insurance, it's actually having an AI insurance. It's much like if you have a car, you probably might have a car crash, so you buy a car insurance. If you're using AI, probably you might goof up sometime with your AI system, so you might need to have an AI insurance so that in some cases it will help you remediate customers or even your business if you make a loss or if you basically agonize someone. So in summary, my fundamental tenet of the book is you can develop AI responsibly. It's not a big deal, you can do it, but if you have to understand the risk. You have to understand them better specific to your use case or your context. Don't uh, My advice to businesses is don't think about like a umbrella problem. Think about in your context what is important, what is value, what's your purpose, and in that context if your AI is doing it right for you. So
So
if you want to buy the book, it would be released probably next month with Epres, with Springer. It should be available on Amazon Kindle, etc. I believe that should be easy to find.
yes, that should be great. No, I think I'm glad that you wrote the book, and I'm sure our global viewers and listeners would get an opportunity to buy it and read it and understand it. I think responsible AI is a emerging approach, and I think right now it's more theoretical and what we are trying to define how to make the algorithms more responsible. But at one point, we'll have to bring the responsibility into the code itself. If it's not in the code, then algorithm to expect that algorithm would be responsible would be probably naive to think that algorithm will follow all the instructions and hope that it will follow all everything that humans want them to do, unless we specifically put it into the code. And then also when the algorithms, there will be self-improving code, then we have no idea where it takes us. Even if the responsibility is written in the code, it may or may not follow. So we have a very tough, complex challenges coming our way, and we have to figure out all different kinds of approaches that can help us make sure that the future of AI, the progress and development in AI is for the future of the humanity, for the betterment of the humanity. So thank you so much, Anand, for participating in Risk Roundup today. We
Thank you.
appreciate we appreciate your thoughtful insight on responsible AI. And even if a single decision maker can understand the trends in responsible AI based on the discussion we had today, this Risk Roundup dialogue has been of service, and we thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And good luck for your book. And Risk Roundup, a global initiative launched by Risk Group, is a security risk reporting for risk emerging from existing and emerging technologies, technology convergence and transformation happening across cyberspace, aquaspace, geospace, and space. We at Risk Group believe that risk management, security, and peace, they walk together hand in hand. Though security is related to management of threats and peace to the management of conflict, risk management is related to management of security vulnerabilities as well as management of conflict. It is not possible to conceive any one of the three without the existence of the other two. All three concepts feed into each other. We believe that the security we build for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secured for everyone across nations. Tradition becomes our security. So, if we build a culture of managing risk effectively, it will lead us to security, and security will lead us to peace. Let's manage the existing and emerging risks together. For more information on the risk roundups, to watch the risk roundup videos, or hear the risk roundup podcast, please go to riskgroupllc.com and do not forget to subscribe and share. Until next time, I'm Jayshree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.